Hey, what is up, you guys? This is Washable Platypi here with another video, and today we are actually going to be going over my account. Now we did this at the very beginning of the season 2 of RTA. It has since passed, and the end of season has come. We are now into the preseason, and uh, I did end up making Legend. I placed rank 70 overall, so I'm very proud of myself. Last day was very rough. There was a lot of just stress and like making sure you get those final games in. I'm sure you guys were watching all the other streamers as they pursued their Legend rank as well. So we did get the frame here. It looks awesome. I'm really happy with it. I'm very happy that I did end up finishing Legend. So today we're actually going to be going over my units that I use for that season. This account review, there will be a review also on Jagan X's channel as well. He did review my account as well, but I did want to upload for you guys. I had recorded a video live before, and it actually, like, the file corrupted, so I'm recording it now off stream. So but we're gonna go ahead and get right into it. To start off, this was probably the most important unit of my RTA. I was what you would call a Gab gamer, so I used a lot of Arbiter Vildred on the last day. I did a lot of, I don't want to call it slow cleave, but for the most part, yeah, my drafts were pretty damage heavy. I didn't do a lot of the like slower night drafts, so but I did use this RB quite a bit. He is different from the last video, actually. I dropped his attack just a tad, and I gave him more speed, so he is a lot faster now. Not quite that 200 KCP, but overall this RB was great. I also, depending on the player, was able to take this RB into their Tomokas, and it would outspeed. So, very important unit. Again, probably my most drafted unit of that, at least that last day. I played about around 900 total matches, and I ended with like a 58% win rate, so not the greatest, but still got to that top 100, so that's really all that matters to me. But yeah, the next up was Kayron. Kayron was actually also one of my highest picked units on that last day. Excuse me, sorry. I really cranked up my Kayron's damage, and I gave him a lot better gear, I would say. And I switched him to a skill 1. So normally, the skill 1 portrait, and I normally you do that for anti-cleave, and I think that's probably the best anti-cleave option, is to go with the skill 1 EE, as well as either portrait or dust devil. Portrait gives you more guaranteed bonus damage, though. Elia's knife is still really strong, but specifically in the anti-cleave matchup, there's times where you aren't able to actually damage, let's say, like a Specter Tenebria, right? And you won't be able to get that Elia's knife proc, whereas Portrait will guaranteed give you that 20% extra damage. Overall, though, Kayron was super high priority pick for me because I just wanted to draft a lot of damage, and I wanted to threaten my opponent before they could kind of bulk up. Now, this Kayron is slower. He is only 181 speed. But when I drafted units like Faithless Lidica and stuff like that, it made it so he did move before some of the slower, like, tankier units, which is really nice. So, overall, one of the higher priority picks for me. It was really good if I picked Arby and they picked Tomoka. I could follow up with Kayron, and Kayron seemed to do pretty good into that as well. A Coli, I actually didn't pick A Coli almost at all. And I had her built for those tank matchups, so a lot of the times against players who ban Specter Tenebria, you know that they're going to kind of draft really bulky units like Krau, they're going to draft the Ruels, they're going to draft the Tywins, and they're going to take you into the later stages of Frenzy. So in order to like combat that, I had a Coli as like a last pick option to kind of apply pressure to their draft. Now, she's not the fastest, right? So I could never use this unit to speed contest. And if there was a Falconer Kluri on the other side, she was almost always going to get outsped. However, versus some players and versus the right drafts, like Assassin Coli becomes a must ban unit, and it kind of gives you more priority on the other units that you want to pick in your draft. Sometimes just rounding out a draft like a Coli Dark Corvus versus tank players really seals the deal, and it makes it really hard for them to choose who to ban, because an RNL proc here, being able to be untouched, the A. Coli will run rampant, and it will be very hard to deal with. So overall, I think this build was probably best for what I needed her to do, and the times that I did draft her and she made it through versus those tank players, like, it did win me the match. So again, A. Coli, just a really good unit. There are some people that can attain the stats that I have with like 40 more speed. That's crazy to me. They have, like, I guess higher tier gear on their A. Colis, but this is kind of just the leftovers. So overall though, great unit. I'm glad that I had her built. Next up is Specter Tenebria. Now this was probably one of the most banned units of that final day of RTA. And I think it's a pretty reasonable pre-ban, given how strong she was. With units like ML Krau, FCC, stuff like that, Specter Tenebria is like super valuable, because it forces either a must ban on the ML Krau, or it forces a must ban on the Specter Tenebria, right? It forces you to choose, can I deal with Specter Tenebria's damage, which the answer is oftentimes no. Or can I have enough AO like E and I have to get rid of the ML Krau, which deals with the Specter Tenebria. So it often puts your opponent in a really tough drafting situation where they want to take the SSB, they want to take the RB, they want to take like I've seen in the past, like Fire Charlotte, for example, as an AoE answer to Specter Tenebria. And you can't really do that with the ML Krau in the field, and especially if they have like a Diene, if they have like a Ruele, stuff to keep the Spectenny alive. So a lot of the times it's just easier to pre-banner. I didn't get to use Specter Tenebria a lot, but when I did, and when I early picked Specter Tenebria, I usually was able to win the game because it forced my opponent into like really awkward drafting situations. A lot of the times I know Falconer Kluri is also a really good first pick. I would usually pre-ban Fallen Cecilia, and then I would lock in, if they first pick Flurry, I would lock in Specter Tenebria, and I would lock in ML Krau. And that kind of locked me into this protect the Stenny comp. But regardless, still on one of my better DPS sets in terms of gear. And honestly, I wouldn't change her build at all. If anything, maybe switch her off Toghels and put her onto, I think, the Crimson Moon artifact, the Tenebria artifact with extra dual attack chance. I think that one's pretty good, but honestly, wouldn't change a thing. Briseria, I never drafted, or if I did draft her, she never made it through the draft, and that was pretty intentional, I would say. So, Briar Witch Iseria is one of those units that if your opponent, let's say, locks in Kayron, and they lock in Remnant Violet, and you pick Briar Witch Iseria, this unit becomes a must ban, right? So it kind of frees up the rest of your draft, and you know that you will be able to pick 4 other units to kind of deal with what they have. So having Briar Witch Iseria, in my opinion, like, just built, right? Because if she makes it through the draft, you will win. Like 9 times out of 10, you will win the match because of just her kit being such a hard counter to units like Ruele and units like Kayron. So again, overall, really like this unit. One of my favorite units actually of all time. I really like the lore behind her. I like her art style, but never made it through the draft once. But again, that was worth it. It was good enough for me to have this gear on her and available in case she did get through. I'm only showing this unit in particular because I actually drafted Green Vildred versus one particular opponent I had on ladder. It wasn't necessarily on the last day, but in the week prior, there was a cleaver that only really cleaved with like RB and Green Vildred. So if he took the RB and you pre-ban like the Alots, I actually drafted this Vildred to kind of take away one of his speed imprints and kind of not ruin, but like make his draft worse. And then I could just pick other units like the like the Kayron, like the other anti-cleave options, and it became extremely difficult for him to deal with. So having just the random Green Vildred built just for that one matchup, I never drafted him any time else, but having him for this one draft was super key, which is good. He's also just a 12 speed imprint, so oftentimes versus that player you can draft like the Green Vildred, and then I was able to draft my Faithless Lidica. Overall, really good. Remnant Violet was another unit that I drafted, I would say, quite often. His damage is on the lower side. I did opt for the Lifesteal Rilet, and I think Lifesteal Rilet will win you the match more times than just a regular like non-Lifesteal Rilet. If you're not able to lock in those Soul Weavers to keep him alive, if you're not able to have access to that Ruele, a non-Lifesteal Rilet once dead, like, and we all know the memes, right? We all know Rilet always gets hit. If he does get hit and just dies, it's game over. One of your biggest sources of DPS is gone. So I do like having that extra bulk, and not only the extra bulk, but the sustainability of the lifesteal set. As you get further on into Frenzy, the lower damage numbers really don't matter. So around Frenzy 4-ish, 4 to 5, is really when Rilet, I think, starts to become a threat that they can't ignore, and they have to start hitting him. Granted, if they hit him anyways, it doesn't matter. But the more times you hit him, the more skill 3s he gets, the more healing he gets. It's great. One of the most drafted picks of, I would say, the last day for me. But yeah, Rilet, great overall unit. I was pretty happy with this build. The bulk was nice. Previously, if I were to do this, I would have more defense than HP, but with a lot of the true damage units like Emil Krau and Emil Haste being pretty big counters to the Remnant Violet, even like Blue Krau with the skill 3, like you want just more HP, so let's say if the Blue Krau misses, it gives you just that small chance to live, right? And obviously with like the Emil Krau and the Emil Haste, you want to just be able to survive their true damage skill 3s. So more HP, better. Fire Ravi actually was another pick that I had built, and I had her ready. She's plus 15. I would say she has some pretty nice gear. However, I didn't find the opportunities to draft her as much as I would like. But in the matches that I did draft her and she did go through, she did win me a lot of the games. So against a lot of the actual like the Alencia players, Alencia, like Emil Krau, Emil Tywin, the tankier players, if you can lock in the Fire Ravi, you're in a pretty good spot. And if they don't have any like true way to like keep her locked down, she will just run rampant and will win you the game. I personally prefer speed set. I am running the stun chance on skill 3 as well as like a non-maxed EE, which kind of hurts, but overall she was a great unit still. Didn't pick her as much as I wanted to, but when, again, like I said, when she gets through, like, she just is something that like has to be dealt with, especially on Sigurd's side. If you drop her below that Sigurd's and she gets a skill 3 or just even a skill 1, she will most likely heal back to full. It's that insane. Her biggest, like, or worst matchups, I would say, are matchups versus like the Rylets, the Tomokas, stuff with like a lot of like really solid single target damage that can kind of just burst her down in one go. So you have to be careful of that, but if you can dodge those units or dodge those matchups with her, she's great. So, and this was actually the Faithless Lidica that I used. She's only 277. Her effectiveness is only 135. However, she won me so many matches because of how I drafted. As you can see, we also have the Faithless Lidica skin. I think it's an okay skin. I'll be honest, I'm not that impressed by it, but Faithless Lidica actually, as a last pick, was one of the most, I would say, valuable units I had built on the last day. And I'll kind of explain how I drafted afterwards. But normally, if I went like Emil Krau RB and then like Emil Haste, followed by like a Kayron or like a Rilet, if I were to last pick the Lidica, it made it really hard for them to decide which units they had to ban, because Lidica almost always guarantees the first turn if they aren't able to like speed contest it, right? If they've already locked in their draft and you last pick a Lidica, they either have to ban it or they concede giving you the first turn, which is, to me, crazy. I think that's such good value out of a unit. And if you draft her with the right DPS, like, it's even better. I know that, like, with, like, a Stenny, right? If I'm able to lock in RB Stenny Lidica with, like, the ML Krau and ML Haste, and, like, they don't want the RB to go through, let's say, because they don't have an answer, or they're afraid of Tomoka getting outsped. You can just deal with everything else since your Faithless Lidica will make it through the draft and guarantee you that first turn. Very few units like Tomoka, I would say. I haven't seen very many that can outspeed at 277. There are a few. I'm not going to mention any names in case, because I do know them and I don't want to like dox their stats or anything. But there are some Tomokas that can exceed like that 275, 280 range, and versus them, obviously you can't speed contest if you know, but I would say 99% of the people out there will not be able to speed contest of Lidica. Even at 277. 277 is not the fastest by any means, but it's still fast enough. SSB, I actually didn't use SSB all that often, but she's really good versus like certain cleave matchups, so it's good to have her built. This wasn't nearly tanky enough for my liking personally, but again, you have to have her built. You have to have her ready because there's certain matchups where she, again, will just win you the game. So I'm glad I had her built. I did draft her. I can't say I never drafted her, but I did draft her. But most of the time, it's become increasingly difficult, I guess, for SSB to be drafted with units like Roana, with units like Dark Corvus, now with units like ML Krau. There's just too many things that like counter this unit, so she has to be a last pick 5, or you have to like start banning the answers or draft them yourself. I know versus some players, I know there was I forget who it was, but they had Lilias Dizzy, and I was able to draft SSB plus Roana, and it made it easier for me because I already had the ML Krau. So I kind of took away almost all of the counters to the SSB, and since it was like the Lilias Dizzy, like it's the same with an SSB counter for getting that healing back. Also, my Roana was on Stella Harpus, so you can kind of deal with the debuffs, but there are like certain draft scenarios where you can kind of pick the counters with, but I don't recommend drafting just straight up Roana SSB, because they ban the SSB, then you're stuck with a Roana that probably won't do anything. So Apoc Ravi, actually, so this Apoc Ravi was fantastic. This is not the build that I used. This neck was not I-90. It was 2 less speed, so just imagine this with like 196 speed and 265. I I-90'd it after the season was over, but Apoc Ravi by far was one of the best picks. One of the best units as well to have for that last day. It's one of the best like anti-tank units because of like how naturally tanky this unit is, right? So Apoc Ravi is extremely good into units like ML Krau, the ML Krau, like the Ruels and stuff. If you watch YDCB, I fought him on ladder once, and you'll watch his draft versus mine. I used Apoc Ravi, and she was one of the main reasons why I won. There was a couple misplays, but overall, like Apoc Ravi was a like premium unit for that last day. I was talking with some of my friends in Fleet, and they kind of sold me on the speed set Apoc Ravi on the Crimson Seed. Gotta say, it's probably the best decision I've made, switching her to the speed set, so props to my friends there. Speed set Apoc Ravi 100% over counter. You don't want to rely on that like counter set. Also, you just lose stats. Ideally, I'd want more crit damage. If anything, I'd look for more crit damage on this Apoc, but again, overall, really solid unit. Won me a lot of matches. Alencia, I didn't draft this Alencia almost at all. I think Alencia is in a pretty awkward spot given Fire Ravi's like rise to power. I think Alencia is not that strong personally. Um, there are times where you can draft her, but overall, just not the unit that I saw, or not saw, but not the unit that I needed to draft most of the time. There's too many scenarios where like there's just better units available. So, but I did still have her built. Obviously, like she's still not a bad unit. Having a defense buff is never bad, but Alencia just didn't quite cut it for units, at least to me, because Fire Ravi was already kind of a weak matchup for myself. Uh, Ambitious Tywin. So this is the A Tywin that I used. I actually put him onto Adamant Shield because I wanted more mitigation when I drafted him. There are times where you can just win the game because of your draft. And drafting Emil Tywin, and I'll show you as well after. I don't think I skipped anyone, no. The Basar pick. So Emil Tywin plus Basar. Emil Tywin Basar, really, really, really solid. Like, probably the most toxic two-pick combination that I can think of. Especially, like, I'll show you in a bit, but I ran Book on my Basar, and it really, like, made it hard for my opponent to play the game. As my friend says, your free trial of movement has ended. So being able to like immediately soulburn the Tywin skill 3 when his turn comes around is pretty obnoxious. And if they don't have the way to deal with it, if they don't have the FRS to deal with it, which versus 182 effectiveness sometimes is rough to achieve, they're not gonna move. Once you get the slow debuff on, it's over. And you're just gonna start turn rotating, and eventually they either yield out, which I had happen a few times, or you just slowly whittle them down before they can do anything. So Emil Tywin really strong still. I think I would say he's probably stronger with the changes to Frenzy now that they're adding more effectiveness. However, we'll kind of see how his damage goes. I might switch him to a DPS build for the Season 3 of RTA. Who knows? This was the Momo that I had, and I never drafted her. I'll just kind of show her stats here, but overall, I never really drafted this unit. So, she was here though. Not very many debuffs. I don't think any debuff players on the last day. It's too inconsistent, too risky. There's too many chances for 15% to occur. So, Momo just kind of sat there. I'll be honest. FCC, I went with the effectiveness-based FCC. However, I didn't have quite enough effectiveness, I would say. So, I think she was fine, personally. However, she was the unit that I pre-banned the most. I would say probably 70-80% of my pre-bans were Fallen Cecilia on this last day. Because I just wanted to like get rid of their big sources of mitigation. I wasn't cleaving by any means. Like I wasn't like a Fliticacedom RB picker, but I did kind of like, I don't want to say slow cleave either because I didn't have Blue Rose built, but I did just want to get rid of like probably the best source of mitigation, which is the Fallen Cecilia, and I can kind of deal with the other picks, like the other sources of mitigation, like the Kraus and stuff like that, because it's really only one. If you can get rid of like the adamant, if you can make it so it's only one like Aureus, you can kind of blow up these Kraus before they get a chance to like either put up the defense buff or get their skill 3 off. And if they have skill 3, it's usually on like a low priority target. So I had her built, she was here, but I pre-banned her like I said 70% of the time, so rarely saw use. Dark Corvus, this is kind of just throw on gear. I would never draft this, and I never did draft this, but he was just there. I don't recommend this build at all. Actually, I think this build's not very good. I would want these same stats with like 40 more speed. So Take that as you will, but I never drafted this. I would not draft this current build in RTA either. So Flurry. This Flurry actually, it was okay. I think I'm gonna switch her to a bulkier Flurry with like less effectiveness, but overall, like this Flurry wasn't bad. Uh, I drafted her occasionally. I drafted her versus like Tomokas and stuff like that because it kind of made it so they either picked like an Acid to contest the Flurry, or like they just had to ban the Flurry because otherwise Tomoka would be useless. So then they ban the Flurry and you get your RB. So and if they don't ban the Flurry, then you get the Flurry and you just Flurry the Tomoka. So it's a kind of a win-win situation there. But honestly, like I think the faster, like I know there's a lot of Flurries that range like in the 290 range with more bulk and less effectiveness, and I think that's where I'm going to be going with her build in the future. So overall though, pretty good unit, obviously. Like if you've ever been soloed by a Flurry, it feels pretty bad. So I think she's still probably the most flexible first pick in the game. She'll remain the most flexible third pick or first pick in the game unless they decide to nerf her. But I also saw a lot of Elbrus Flurries, so I might try that out as well. Elbrus Flurry, like getting a counter with a CR boost and like pushing another unit is kind of crazy. So Basar. So I like had my eyes opened when I started using this Tagahel's Basar. He is not the fastest by any means. He is pretty slow, actually, if you think about it. However, he is fast enough, right? And that's all he had to be, was fast enough. And versus like the units like Flurry and stuff like that, you obviously just ban the Flurry so they can't like get rid of your Basar, or they can't just make your Basar useless. However, being able to soul burn his skill 3, guarantee that they will not have a defense buff before your DPS moves, as well as push them back, probably one of the most important like aspects of this unit and of my draft. I personally can say I won a good chunk of my matches because I was able to just burn a Basar skill 3. There were instances where it's like, wow, like I wish I had Crown so I could try to Crown to win the game, but if I was already behind at that point, it didn't matter, and I was probably going to lose anyways. I shouldn't be relying on Crown. But being able to soul burn on that turn 1, or like I was mentioning earlier with Tywin, saving the soul burn on Basar because he still had 150 effectiveness. He still had good enough effectiveness to land in most things. But being able to soul burn like the Tywin, being able to soul burn like a greater attack buff RB skill 3, it really, really, really made it so much better for the drafts. Even like being able to burn like a Flurry, right? Burning a Flurry skill 3 right off the bat if you have Basar and Flurry into like the Basar skill 3 into a like big damage is also really good. I know there was times where I was able to like just straight up kill Rylets because of that. If they didn't have the Lilias, right? If they didn't have the cleanse, no cleanse with the Basar, you burn that skill 3, or like you burn the Flurry into the Ruele and then you skill 3 the Basar, and you just start like pinging away. You start doing little bits of damage, and over time it adds up, and then you just kind of win, right? So I think Tagahel's Basar is definitely the way to go for RTA, personally. Some people will argue otherwise, but I really, like I said, I really like the ability to soul burn the Basar. It was so clutch. It was so clutch. And there's times where you hit the Rylets you right off the bat without like the Flurry there, and you just win the game at that point. Because if they can't cleanse it, doesn't matter. No dodge, and then you just kill the Rylet. Easy. Dizzy, I actually didn't draft Dizzy once. I know that for a fact. I didn't draft Dizzy once on the last day. And I think it's because I'm not running the like new variant of Dizzy that a lot of people are, which is the really fast version. So I know a lot of people are running like these 280, 290 dizzies, and it's pretty toxic, I gotta say. So I might switch to that version. I don't really have that much speed gear to give her, but I may move around some builds and kind of see where we can go. But yeah, the really fast dizzies are extremely hard to deal with. I would say they're actually super annoying. So, but yeah, I still had her built, but I innately think counter set is bad because of units like Roana. If they know you run counter dizzy, they can just draft Roana, and it's kind of rough actually. It may seem like, oh well, like it's only a 20% chance, but I feel like versus Roana's the counterattack procs more often. Little tinfoil hat moment there, but just like I'm pretty sure like it feels like if you've ever played RTA and you're fighting Roana, your dual attack chance is just increased by a bajillion, your counter attack chance is increased by like 200-300%, and that Roana is gonna get so much more value off of that counter set. But not a bad unit still. I think her build is still fine. She's pretty bulky. I would like more HP though, again with sense of the true damage. But yeah, the dizzy was fine, but I never used her once. So Lilias was used quite a bit actually, and I realized too late that my speed tuning was a tad off, but I didn't have the like gear to give her to make her faster. So she wasn't actually faster than my Arby, which is kind of sad if they had the flurry and Arby outsped. But Lilias, I would say, I don't want to say won me a lot of matches, but more so the Holy Sack won me some matches. So if you play like against like the Dizzies, against like the Tywins, and they kill your Lilias, right? And you haven't been able to skill 3 and your entire team is locked down, your Lilias just then revives and cleanses your team, and you like have a complete turnaround on like how the match was going, and then it makes it so like it's essentially just like a free cleanse if you think about it. That's how I thought of it anyways, or thought about it. Or like let's say they skill 3 flurry into the Lilias and then they Rylet your Lilias and then she just comes back. They essentially wasted 2 super like huge cooldowns on a unit that just comes back anyways. So if that feels a lot better too. Obviously if the Rylet cuts your Lilias, they're probably going to try to flurry Rylet something else, but if your Lilias cuts the Rylet just by like let's say 2 or 3%, they'll probably try to all in the Lilias, and at that point once your Holy Sack procs, you're sitting pretty good. So ML Krau. So this was my first pick actually. If I had the option to first pick ML Krau, I first picked him. And honestly, like a lot of people will say to run mitigation on Krau, and I actually agree with that statement. I think Adamant Shield ML Krau is a lot better than Portrait. However, for this last day, I had to decide how I wanted to play, and I wanted damage. So Portrait was definitely like the go-to option. Because I use like units like ML Haste as well. So I just wanted to get them as low as possible, and then just kind of get like, I don't want to say it's kind of like a triple execute if you think about it. So against like these high prio targets, you can like Last Rider Krau skill 3 into Ryla skill 3 into ML Haste skill 3, and you kind of just eliminate one unit from the game. If they don't have a Soul Weaver, it just feels really good. Like the damage like becomes hard. Like after a while, the damage is just like too much, right? Like it's unsustainable for them to take that amount of damage. So ML Krau, as well as just giving AoE immunity, right? So against units and people who pick like the ML Tywin early, like AoE immunity is huge. It almost turns ML Krau into that like must ban, and then you're able to like gab game them with other units. So but like I said, my number one first pick unit, followed by, I would say, my next first pick unit was Falconer Kluri, but last Rider Krau, MVP of my last day push. I think I gave him some of my best gear, I would say, and he didn't disappoint. So Blue Krau, I want to say I didn't draft him a lot, but I'm pretty sure I did. Into the people who also drafted like ML Krau, I drafted him versus like White E, I remember. He's on 5 purple pieces. I think this build is pretty bad. I would like 200 more defense with the same HP. And I'd like him faster personally, but overall, like, this build was good enough for the last day. 100 FRes is enough to like resist some of the lower effect res units, while still giving you enough to like give you like, let's say, a 50-50 on like the higher effectiveness, like a 150 effectiveness, 160 effectiveness unit. And the speed was actually really key. So I could have made him bulkier in the defense department and given him like the standard like 160, 170 FRes. However, he was not speed tuned properly with my ML Haste, so I had to pretty much just make him faster by dropping some of the other stats. Gave him more HP, obviously. Like, I'm willing to drop that defense if it gives him more HP, and then essentially, if you're able then to just skill 3 the Crown into the skill 3 the ML Haste and kill something, that's kind of how it works. So, but yeah, he was fine. When I drafted him, he was still bulky enough, but again, I think his overall stat line could be a lot better. I think his bulk is pretty low for being like HP ring, and I think I just have like not great stat distribution on him. It's also just because, again, like I said, 5 purple pieces, but this crowd did the job. He was still really good, and I don't think I'm changing him anytime soon because I just don't have the gear to give him. So this build was fine. It worked out, and yeah. This Ruele, also on 4 purple pieces. I think her stats are a little lacking in the bulk and the speed. I would like her 10 speed faster, and I would like 1,000-ish more HP if possible. Overall, though, I think her stats are fine. I'd also like her on immunity, but for when I used her on the last day, it was good enough. 20k 1.8 is still really hard to like burn through on a Ruele, so yeah, outside of just not having immunity, I think the build was fine. I wasn't really a Krau Ruele player though on the last day, I'll be honest. Like I said, I was a DPS focused, like damage focused, with RB and stuff. So same with Diene. I actually only drafted Diene once, and it was on accident. I wanted to pick SSB, and I locked in the Diene instead. And she actually won me the game because the opponent wasted 2 high like value skill 3s, a Riley skill 3 and a ML Haste skill 3, and it didn't kill this Diene. He didn't crit on the Riley, and then the ML Haste left my Diene with like 1k HP. And she was able to stabilize to the point where I was able to heal up, get the shields, and then like the rest of my units won me the game. So he wasted those big like targets, and then since she didn't die, like it was just overall like super high value for me. So but yeah, I think her overall stat line is pretty bad. Personally, I have 46% wasted stats that I would probably like into speed, HP, and FRes. I think her defense is really good still, but yeah, like just too many wasted stats here for my liking personally. So Blood Moon Haste. I guess I can show General Purgus because I did draft him a couple times, but that was mostly just for the anti-cleave. You draft him versus Lidica, and I drafted General Purgus, and then I drafted ML Haste because ML Haste was on Idol Steer. So being able to like double push up your RB versus the Lidica is sometimes just enough to kill and to skill 3 before they move. The rest of the team moves, which is really nice. So Blood Moon Haste though, probably one of my better built units. I think, given the fact that he's only B imprint, makes him feel a lot better personally. I think his stat line, I don't want to say nerfed his stat line, but I changed his stat line just a bit to slow him down slower than my Blue Krau. But normally he's around the 211-ish speed with the same amount of HP and defense. I just had to swap around some pieces to make sure that Krau did move first, because I saw it actually a lot on the last day. People had mistooed ML Haste and Blue Kraus, where their ML Haste would go and then they couldn't skill 3, so they missed the chance to execute, and at that point I could just win the game. So having a speed-tuned ML Haste and ML Krau, so your Krau will always move first. Granted, I was still in speed RNG range, but making it so Krau moves first and then you heal with the haste is so important. There's so many times, like before I tuned it, where like you want to skill 3 with haste to get an execute, but then you can't finish up with the Krau. So specifically, like an example would be versus a Rylet, where like you're probably gonna miss the Krau skill 3, but it'll bring it in execute range of the Blood Moon haste. So but yeah, this was the Blood Moon haste that I used, and I think I'm really happy with the stats. Use again MVP. Idle Shear by far is my favorite artifact on haste. I know Potion Vial is also like a pretty viable option. I'm very opposed to Portrait Haste, I'll be honest. I think he needs to offer more utility than just like that skill 3, because of how frequently I drafted him without like there being an RB, and I just drafted him as like a source of damage and a source of healing. So I wanted like the artifact to kind of benefit the team more, and Idle Shear definitely did that. And my last RTA unit was the Roana. I didn't actually find myself having to draft her that often, because if I'm first picking ML Krau, no one's going to pick SSB into that. And if they do, like, I'm probably going to win. So, Roana, obviously just, again, a really strong unit to have versus, like, the SSB, versus, like let's say, Lilias Dizzy. I know a lot of players, I think a lot of the life members had counterset knights or Elbrus knights, so you could actually take Roana into that as well. It was like another draft strategy. I think I'd probably want immunity if I'm gonna change her build, but honestly, you just make her as thick as possible, right? Make her bulky and Stella Harpa. 100% Stella Harpa in my opinion. If you have this artifact, run this artifact on her. It is amazing. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I didn't really have any of these other units built. Like previously I had Tomoka built, but I ungeared her because like it was just not worth me using because I didn't have Dignisorb. So overall though, guys, that was my account. Kind of just the draft strategies quickly before I end the video. It's been a pretty long video, to be honest, but hopefully you guys enjoyed. But draft strategies, I would always, if given the opportunity, first pick ML Krau. And then I would usually follow that up with like an RB Specter Tenebria or an RB ML Haste, given what my opponent drafted. And then I rounded out the draft either with Basar ML Tywin, Basar Lidica. If I got like the RB plus ML or RB Steny, and then they didn't ban the ML Haste or pick the ML Haste, I would pick the ML Haste plus like a Kayron, or pick like the ML Haste plus who else? ML Haste plus like APOC Ravi, ML Haste plus Fire Ravi. It kind of just depended on the rest of their draft, but yeah, like overall, like it was pretty much just like deal as much damage in like a large burst. If they don't have any Soul Weavers, you kind of just win, because like it's something that's not sustainable. And if they don't have like these sustainable units, like let's say the Ravi or the APOC that do have like the healing in the skill 1, or like the Sigurd Scythe, you're probably gonna win. And that's kind of just how I got to Legend. I was a Gab gamer. That's pretty much it. not really much else other way to explain it other than the fact that I was just a Gab gamer. But yeah, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'm excited for the new unit buffs. I'm excited for Landy. I'm excited for LQC. LQC has been really fun in testing. I've used her in Arena quite a bit. So, again, guys, thank you so much, though, for watching. I appreciate it. If you haven't followed me yet on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/washableplatypi. I would love if you came by to one of my streams, said hello. And, yeah, thank you guys for watching again. Remember to like the video, comment any builds or any particular things that you would want to see in future videos, and I would love it if you subscribed as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, this is Watchable Platypi, and I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.